In this episode, we'll discuss how to deal with the cultural differences within the context of the team. How does the team interact and communicate with each other? How do we deal with the language barrier? How do you develop trust when there are competing values? These are not easy issues and are compounded in multicultural teams. But we will revisit leadership again and discuss how we can reach our objectives when there are varied cultural definitions of effective leadership.
Welcome to another of Dr. Phil's Leadership Matters podcast. In this series, Phil will be sharing from his decades of serving and leading multicultural teams from Africa to Eastern Europe to Latin America. Just click the link in the description box to download our free resources or the complete study guide. You can also access any of his other podcasts by going to icmcanada.org/leadershipmatters.
As we've noted here before, the degree of relative distance between the cultures of team members will impact the complexity of building a team. Further complicating this process is the fact that the interaction is not just between the overall culture and the host culture, but also the culture of each member of the team, which may be different again. Yet the host culture, the one in which the team is embedded and wants to serve, must be the focus. This may or may not be the home culture of the team leader, which again makes it a little more complicated. This does not mean that the host culture is not viewed critically, though. As with all cultures, it must be viewed from a biblical perspective, as all of our cultures have been tainted by sin and the fall. But to do this effectively, there must be mutual respect based on a team of equals rather than creating power differentials among team members. So let's look at some specific areas in which this should occur. As a team leader, is the host culture also your culture or is it a different one? How does this influence you and your team and also your leadership in the team? Perhaps the fundamental area of any team to deal with is communication. How team members from different cultures relate to each other can create misunderstanding and hurt. For example, while some cultures come close to each other to talk and touch, say as in a Latino culture, those from more northern European cultures tend to want at least a meter of space. They also typically do not greet each other as openly and physically. A handshake is usually enough. This can make them seem rather cold to those who are from more warmer communicative cultures. These differences require knowledge of everyone's role, as well as a self-awareness of one's own cultural norms and those of the other team members. The team will need to develop norms of communicating, most likely aligned with the host culture or a hybrid of this depending upon the mix of the team. This means that every team member must give up something of their own culture and norms for the greater good of the team and the mission. How do we deal with the differences is crucial. Confronting them head on is how a Western or European would approach them. However, this can be problematic with team members who come from more of a shame-based culture. A safe atmosphere of forgiveness needs to be created where mistakes can be admitted without feeling shame. As these cultural norms clash, it's necessary to constantly be engaged in conflict resolution, as we have previously discussed in other episodes. Communication based on mutual respect and trust is essential for any team to function, but is compounded in teams made up of members from various cultures and countries. Considering the cultural mix of your team, how can you best deal with issues that need to be confronted? Now, the degree to which the local language needs to be learned by every team member depends upon the task and the length of their stay in the host country. Since language acquisition is closely linked to cultural understanding, for those team members staying in the host country for any significant length of time, learning the local language is essential and invaluable. On most multicultural teams, the majority of members will likely speak English at some level. However, to conduct most of the ministry and team discussions in English often puts a greater burden on those whom English is a second or perhaps even a third language. While learning English may be helpful for team members involved on an international level, learning the local language will likely be more helpful in their local ministry. This is important to do so that subcultures based on language do not form within the team as little cliques. To help avoid such problematic issues with regards to language, as well as many of the other reasons, it is beneficial to have someone from the host culture as the team leader, as well as the majority of the team being able to converse in the local language. While others are learning the local language, not requiring them to be involved in the business aspect of the team meetings may also be helpful at that point. And not having a majority of English speakers on the team will likely help the overall mission, as well as limiting the amount of short-termers in any one team who don't know the language, as they will likely not be there long enough even to learn it. In teams where everyone knows English, particularly in a non-English host culture, the most efficient way of relating is in English. However, it must be remembered that once a relationship has been begun in one language, it's really difficult to switch to another language, as members are they're less fluent in. Where English is used in an international setting is often seen as impersonal in contrast to the mother tongue, which communicates intimacy rather than being impersonal. The pros and cons of this needs to be evaluated by every team. Now, the issue of the use of language is central to the effectiveness of the team and its ability to incarnate the gospel in their local context. Within the country and the team itself, the goal is to remove as many barriers as possible. What is your expectation as a team leader regarding language acquisition? The host language, a common language? So what is your expectation of each one of your team members?
You can view or listen to any of Phil's other podcast series by going to icmcanada.org/leadershipmatters. These include Mentoring Intelligence, Finishing Our Race, the Fivefold Ministry, as well as a variety of other leadership series he has taught over the years. You could also check out our Christian Leadership Institute, which is a unique competency-based ministerial mentorship. To download any of our resources associated with these series, visit our library of materials at icm.org/resources.
It's inevitable that team members will offend one another during the course of working together with all these complexities. This can often be due to various cultural values as to what is sin or what is not. But as Paul writes in Romans 14, our Christian liberty should never be an excuse to offend others. In those areas where the Bible does not prohibit practices of the host culture, these can also be normative for the team. The exception to this is if these activities are divisive among the team and create barriers to the gospel within the host culture. So as practices arise that are found to be offensive among team members, these should be discussed openly and resolved in the spirit of love and compromise. This does not mean that all cultural differences lead to offenses, but disregarding and disrespecting members inevitably does. Team members should be self-aware enough to ask if what they are doing, saying, or thinking is building or undermining trust. So while misunderstandings will occur, it's inevitable, if the team leader is proactive and takes the initiative to open up channels of communication, trust need not be broken. This includes helping each member understand how their particular culture is perceived by others, then helping them not judge each other according to these preconceptions, but for who they are as individuals. Even among our own culture, we live in a time when the geopolitics of the day can cause divisions among believers. We need to separate the decisions and values in our own countries from our relationships with those from other countries and cultures. Accepting each other in Christ, moving beyond cultural stereotypes, is a gift that each member of a multicultural team can give to one another. Discuss some of the behaviors that have been divisive in the team, that are based on differing cultural values, perhaps even including differing Christian values. As with all teams consisting of many cultures are impacted by their structure. This is often determined by the facilitator or team leader. If the team leader is autocratic or hierarchical in their understanding of team, then the team will reflect this. However, if the team leader is inclusive and a servant leader, then the team will likely reflect those values also. See, a team leader has a great influence on how the team functions. They create the atmosphere for how the team will interrelate. Since each member of the team also functions within the context of a local church, a family, friends, etc., the degree to which these other supportive structures meet their needs will influence the expectations they have for the team to meet their needs. Issues such as age, means of income, culture, language, and the task of the team all determines the expectations of the team and how they will meet each other's needs. Working teams are usually under 10 members, since really most individuals cannot emotionally invest in more than that amount of relationships. So then problem solving in multicultural teams is also influenced by culture. Some cultures value a direct approach, it's kind of a Western approach, while others appreciate a more indirect, polite approach, which is typically more Asian. These differences create opportunities for misunderstanding and ongoing conflict. It's further complicated by thinking or saying that one culture is the biblical or right way. Multicultural teams need to begin by understanding each other's cultural default approach and then develop a new approach for their team with which they can all learn to function. While the values of clarity and honesty based on biblical values may be similar from culture to culture, or even Christian culture, the ways of functioning or expressing these in cultural appropriate ways may be very different. Consider and discuss the felt need of every team member in relation to their need for your team to be a supportive structure. One of the key functions of multicultural teams and the team leader is member care. If the individuals are not having their personal needs met, it's unlikely that they will be productive members of the team. After the basic physical needs are met, and interpersonal relationships will be the most significant felt need of every team member. Particularly if the closest relationships team members have in the country are with each other, the degree they can meet these needs with each other is the degree to which the team will be functioning and be effective. See, the relational factor should take into consideration the cultural differences in the area of singleness as it impacts dating, housing, and forming friendships with the opposite gender. Again, these are very real-world issues that the team leader needs to be aware of and deal with. It is also important to realize that not all married couples are getting their interpersonal needs met in their marriage relationship. The health or unhealth of their marriage and family relationships will have a direct impact on the team, which is why we developed our first team materials, which are available on our website in several languages if you're interested in look at them. Now, eventually counseling may be necessary, but personal needs can also be met through activities such as sports and celebrating national holidays together and so on. If care is not taken to meet these needs, the reality of burnout in team members is very likely. Burnout is a case of emotional exhaustion and reduced personal accomplishment, particularly among those who work with people. In order to counteract this, each member of the team should be involved in taking daily, weekly, monthly, and even yearly breaks to refresh themselves spiritually and emotionally, mentally and physically. The stress of living and working in a cross-cultural setting needs to be balanced with input and relaxation. And of course, this will vary from person to person. For the team leader, this also means not being out of balance personally and not requiring performance of team members that will cause them to be out of balance. This will include helping them create boundaries in their own lives so they do not, so they do more than just work in ministry. So that's all they focus on. Of course, this goes against the norm of many cultures and many church cultures. And so how to implement this may vary and require some wisdom. But to give in to a culture that only values work or performance is elevating the culture above biblical wisdom. How can you meet the personal needs of each team member? What are their expectations, and what are your limitations? To evaluate potential burnout, discuss the stress test with each team member. What steps do you need to put in place in order to help team members live balanced, fruitful lives free of burnout? Okay, these are just a few tips from the research and from my own experiences regarding some of the practical issues that arise in multicultural teams. I hope you found this episode helpful. In the next couple episodes, we'll discuss some of the issues relating to specifically to the team leader and their role. I'm sure hope you'll be able to join me then.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Matters and subscribing and sharing us. If you would like to have your own copy of this study, just click on the link in the description box. For any of our other leadership resources, check out our website, www.icmcanada.org/resources.